Welcome to Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant Podcast. These are the stories of those who have received, given, and who are waiting for the gift of life, organ transplantation. Now here's your host and heart and kidney recipient, BJ Odom.
Want to welcome everyone to the podcast, and please make sure you subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you pick up your favorite podcast, and give us that 5-star review. We will much appreciate it anywhere where you do your podding, okay? Do that. Also pass this along to family and friends and help us grow. As this week, we dive into the pancreas transplant. That's right, they have a relatively short but a fascinating history in the field of medicine. The first successful pancreas transplant was performed in 1966 by Dr. Richard Lear at the University of Minnesota. The early attempt, however, was unsuccessful in long term due to complications related to organ rejection and, of course, side effects from the anti-rejection medications. Over the years, advancements in surgical techniques and organ transplant technology have improved the success rate of the pancreas transplants. The introduction to newer anti-rejection drugs has helped reduce the risk of rejection and improve the overall outcome for patients undergoing pancreas transplants. Today, pancreas transplants are primarily performed on patients with type 1 diabetes who also have severe complications such as kidney failure. The procedure can help these patients achieve insulin independence and improve their quality of life. Despite the challenges associated with pancreas transplants, they continue to be a critical treatment option for select patients with diabetes. Ongoing research and innovations in the medical field with transplantation aim to further improve the success rate and long-term outcomes of these procedures. Today, we hear from Paige about her journey that started way back at the age of 3. She is now 15 years out with her pancreas transplantation. Paige, welcome to the podcast, and thank you so much for sharing your story. And as always, we ask people to start from the beginning.
When I was 3 years old, my parents were on the not so wealthy side, and they took me to get my childhood vaccines. And upon receiving the vaccine, there were some of us that received a bad batch. I happened to be one of them. The MMR caused me to be thrown into type 1 diabetes and basically put me in a coma and made my organs quit developing and I quit growing. So when I awoke from the coma, they said I was a brittle diabetic. What that meant was I was on anywhere from 2 to 3 and eventually ended up with like 12 shots a day.
Oh, wow.
And now my kidneys were still operating fine, but the pancreas had completely died. So I was born with a healthy pancreas, but then it just slowly died. So I was on insulin from the age of 3 until I received my transplant. And one of the criteria for the transplant was you have to have something called hypoglycemic unawareness. You have to have uncontrolled blood sugar levels, even with medical intervention. I had all of the above. I'd be walking down the street and talking to my sister, and then I'd end up on the ground and unconscious. So the majority of my life was spent in and out of a hospital. And then I did some research online, and I met a kind of like a support group, but just people that wanted to discuss that they had had a transplant, the pros, the cons, what to expect, what not to expect. And I happened to meet a girl that lived in Chicago, the same place I did at the time, and she said that she had actually spoke to a surgeon down there. So I went down to meet with him. I made an appointment, and I started out with wanting an islet cell transplant. At the time, it was too current. It was in only its infancy stages. And I waited 2 years on that list only to get sicker and sicker. So finally, they moved me from the regular islet cell transplant list to a full-on transplant. They said I didn't have, I couldn't wait forever.
Okay.
And then I received my pancreas.
So now what age was this actually, if you had this from birth?
Didn't have it from birth. I had it from age 3.
Okay, so
I was born perfectly healthy. And then when I turned 3, I received that vaccine. The vaccine threw me into a coma. When I woke from the coma, I was type 1 diabetic.
okay, so then how old were you when you actually got the transplant?
Transplant wasn't known or advanced enough at that point in time. I was born, well, I don't want to say, but just, a year, I'll say a year after the first transplant had ever been done.
Okay.
So that wasn't an option back then. As medical technology advances, things become more readily available. So I didn't receive it. I'm 15 years post-transplant. So 15 years ago, I received my pancreas.
And that
which
was
in itself is a long time.
So then,
because they have a half-life of a pancreas. And the longest living pancreas only is 28 years. Now, pancreas kidney, they have someone that lived 33 years.
But as of right now, you just have a pancreas then, right?
Pancreas only.
Now
which is more uncommon. They've done 330,000 across the whole world. In the United States, I believe that it's quite a bit less.
Now, is your kidney then functioning properly now, or has it always?
My kidney, no, everything was starting to fail. My vision, my kidney, I had neuropathy, I had everything. But after the transplant, the neuropathy went away, the gastroparesis went away, the vision improved slightly and stopped, losing my vision. Everything kind of didn't completely reverse itself, but I'm a different case because I didn't have to take steroids. So I had a much, much better outcome with receiving my transplant.
Wow. Now, that's it. Because, I've talked to a lot of people with kidneys and, of course, I'm a heart and kidney recipient. So I've talked to heart people and kidney people the most. But you are the very first pancreas person that I've ever talked to. So this is kind of different, interesting, and I'm learning this morning.
Yes, a lot of people don't know they can do pancreas only. Most people find out about pancreas transplant because their kidneys are failing and they have multiple issues. I strictly received a pancreas by a very well-known surgeon and basically saved my life. And here I am 15 years later and still have it.
And everything going, I know. Now, are you taking, because you mentioned something, you weren't on steroids. Are you taking any anti-rejection drugs with this? You obviously are, right?
Yes, I still take the anti-rejection drugs. I can never be without the anti-rejection drugs, just like any other organ. If my body knows it's foreign, it'll kill it, obviously, just like any other organ. It shuts it down, it tries to attack it, it looks at it like it's an infection. But in my case, I'm allergic to steroids, so I can't take them. So I actually have managed to keep the kidneys much healthier by not having to take that.
Well, that's a blessing then.
Yeah, and then it doesn't tax out the heart. It doesn't, there's very few people that do not take steroids with transplant. I happen to be one, and my doctor was teaching at the University of Virginia, and they're also reconsidering protocols for non-steroidal when it comes to transplant.
So let me ask you this then. Obviously, the transplant, because, I've talked to many people with, different organs I know, and I know they take the steroids in the beginning and the anti-rejection pills. Like myself, I'm 21 years out now, and I go to the dermatologist like every 4 months, and it's almost like a teenager with pimples. They find, small skin cancers on me all the time. Do these anti-rejection drugs, do they mess with you just as bad?
That.
Yeah, okay. So they mess with you just as bad as they do the rest of us then.
Yeah, the anti-rejection drugs do the same thing to everyone. They tend to, if you have a pre-existing condition for cancer, after taking the anti-rejection drugs, it's going to show up. It's just, if you didn't know you had it and you start on anti-rejections, you're going to know you have it afterwards, because not only does it affect your whole biological system, you know, one of the things is try not to be out in the sun. Well, we live in sunny Florida, so you're more prone to skin cancer for that reason. The cautions they tell you are because they haven't come up with a way. These are good tools to keep the organ safe, but with every give, there's a take. And one of the things is cancer.
Yeah, I know. That's one of the things that kind of in the back of, I had the skin cancers. Obviously, they're being able to be controlled, as this far anyway. But that always worries me in the back of my mind. Oh, am I going to go? And am I going to? Because they told me, now I don't know if it's the same with the pancreas either, but one of the things they told me was probably your heart is going to outlive you, most likely. And I hate to say this, but they say most likely something else will, take you out of this world. Is that the same?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, with the pancreas, it's not quite the same, because the pancreas is a very fragile organ. As we all get older, you hear about people becoming type 2 diabetes because they're overweight, or they don't exercise, or they eat the wrong food, whatever the reason may be. The older you get, the less islet cells your pancreas produces. And a person needs over 100 million islet cells for a normal insulin level in the body. So even after receiving a transplant, you could still get pancreatitis. You can still get sluggish pancreas. You can still get, the pancreas is a little different. When you have a heart or a lung, it's a whole organ, where the pancreas, when it's transplanted, it's like jello. They have to fine thread the organ. It's a much more delicate procedure. It's like fishing through jello to connect it.
Wow. See, this is why I like doing this podcast. I learn something every week for sure. So now after, transplant, and you said 15 years now, how has your life changed after receiving the transplant?
Everything changed. I finally knew what normal was. I know that sounds crazy, but I never knew what normal was. So to speak, like normal living, like I don't have to eat at a set time. I don't have to check my blood 100 times a day. I don't have to have, an artificial pump trying to make the insulin that I didn't make. I don't have the hormones from the insulin raging through my body. So I kind of felt like a calmness come over me. But it is, when you first have it, you're not really sure what's normal and what's not. It takes a while, because someone who has normal blood sugar takes for granted that, hey, I can wake up, and if I don't feel like eating breakfast because I'm in a hurry, I don't have to worry. Well, when your pancreas doesn't work, you don't have that option. You have to take the insulin anyways, and then worry about eating and all those kind of things.
Now, my heart didn't go bad at 3. I was, born with a bad heart, and I can relate to that because actually, I had a surgery at 14 that helped things along and definitely, got more blood to the body and made me feel much better, almost like a normal person. But once that gave out, when I was about 50, I got, the heart transplant, and I woke up like the next morning, and I had never in my entire 50 years of life felt like I did, when I woke up, because everything had changed and parts of my body were probably getting oxygen and blood that never, got it before. So it was amazing. So I really understand when you talk about, your life totally changed and you felt somewhat normal.
Yeah, I woke up, on life support and wrote letters when I woke up, and then I came off. At first, there's such a big change with the pancreas that it takes a little bit for it to kick in, meaning it does produce insulin, but the body has to recognize it at a slower rate. So they let you stay very calm so that the pancreas kind of settles in. And then sometimes they have to add a little insulin just from the stress of the surgery. It doesn't mean the pancreas isn't working. It just takes a little for it to acclimate into your body. So when I woke up, I just felt calm. And no, it wasn't from, having surgical anesthesia. It was a different type of calm. Like, I was almost afraid to like, is this real? Am I really awake? Is it normal? Is this what normal feels like? I wasn't quite sure that. And the first question I asked, is it working? That I wanted to know. And they said everything was fine. But yeah, it's a different type of feeling now compared to then. Now, when I feel like I'm hungry, then I eat. Now I can go somewhere without worrying, am I going to pass out in a store? Is my family going to be talking to me? And then I just, fall out on the floor. I think I knew the paramedics and the firemen by first name. It was a pretty, regular occurrence. And then there was the opposite where the sugars would go real high and start killing the kidneys and shutting down the brain. And I mean, the pancreas does a lot. Everything you take into your body, it converts to insulin. And so you definitely need one to live, but not necessarily. They do have artificial, insulin pumps and, the digestive enzymes and things that you need, they can do artificially. But if you're like me that had it for so long, you can get something called insulin resistant, which I had, where your body just says, hey, nothing's going to work anymore. So in my case, I knew right away, and I have been telling other people who I talk to, that if you are a brittle diabetic and you have hypoglycemic unawareness and you have a life that involves, complex structure, this would definitely be a route, but it is an emotional route. I'm sure for you, BJ, when you received a heart, your first thing was, hey, I'm alive, but you also think about what someone sacrificed to give it to you.
And that's, another thing that someday on this podcast, I'd almost like to get a therapist or something in that vein, because we do go through that. I mean, you're excited, you're happy, you're feeling normal, but in the back of your mind, you always know that someone had to give up their life, for you to feel the way you do. And I know I've talked to people that say, I'm very guilty about this. It's some people have a hard coping mechanism for this also, where I've kind of, put it behind. I figured, it wasn't like I don't
think I ever forget. But because I knew going into this, I was very well prepared. I saw a psychologist. I saw everyone because I was I was against receiving an organ at first.
Okay.
A fireman actually changed my viewpoint on that when he called me selfish, and I'm not a selfish person, but he said his last dying wish was to donate his organs, and I was denying him that. Well, that kind of made me look at life a little different. But I will say that it is a very emotional roller coaster ride, because going in, you have all these emotions at once. You're going under the knife. You don't know if you're coming out of it the same way you're going in. You hope you come out and you're okay, but you really don't know. It's a gamble. And you also know that somebody just lost their loved one. So going in is very emotional. And then even coming out, you have that emotion. I'm fortunate. I got to meet my donor family and talk to them. And, it took 7 years before I met them. And not everyone's ready for that interaction. I was more than ready.
What was there? How was that interaction, if I may ask?
Quite interesting. I had left the area that I received my transplant. And so I had to fly back to where the area was. And I met my donor sister. And while I was speaking to her, his best friend had married his sister. And he started to cry during our conversations. And he then said to me, he was my best friend.
Oh, wow.
And so we all had laughs, cries, questions of, how did the decision making happen? I had a lot of questions, but I tread lightly, but they were more than willing to discuss it. So I was fortunate. I was one of the fortunate ones, and we're still friends today.
Well, this is my only story because I've never met my donor family, but as you know, and a lot of people listen to the podcast, a lot of people that are new to my world, they didn't realize I did stand-up comedy for a long time. And I've told this story many times on the podcast and my other podcast, BJ and Bill, the podcast, my old radio partner. But not long after I had my transplant and I was able to get out, and go back to a comedy stage, I did a show. I mentioned, I had a heart transplant, and I had a gentleman come up to me like at the end of the show. And I know I told a few jokes, but I knew they weren't off color, but still you get just a little nervous when someone comes up. And because he said, my brother passed away a few months ago. And so all of a sudden I'm going, and he was an organ donor. So I'm saying, did I say something that offended this gentleman? Is he, is he going to punch me? What's he going to do? And about that,
right.
He took me and squeezed me as tight as you could possibly squeeze someone and say, seeing you up on that stage tonight, I know you didn't get my brother's organs, but I know somewhere someone's living, a good life and out there being healthy and doing what they love to do just by seeing you. And that was the moment where I think, kind of understood and kind of felt the emotion of a donor family, even though it wasn't my donor family.
Right. I think there's a lot that transpires with donation. Not all organs require someone passing to receive a transplant. So there's also the living donor side. There's a lot of different sides to organ donation.
Yes.
I have been on both sides of the coin, and I only can say that the appreciation from the one that receives it is, obviously you can never say thank you, because thank you is not even a word you can comprehend in this case. But I myself don't think I'd be alive today if someone hadn't had the courage. He signed his license. He made his intent very clear. And so the decision, he made it for them. He made it much more easier.
And that's something we should touch on. And I know that, you've been out and talking, to folks about organ donation. I used to do it back in the days that I worked, that I lived in Fort Myers. But it is very important. I know it's not an easy conversation, but it's important to have that conversation with your family, because really, even if it's on your driver's license, they are the ones that kind of have the final say, at least here in Florida. And so if you tell them
they do, and most of we are an opt-out state or an opt-in. There's two different types, and we don't automatically get to pick and choose. So there's a lot of facets to that. And I think it is important. And one of the things about pancreas transplants that vary from other transplants is not only when you receive a pancreas transplant, you also know it comes from a young donor. Other organs, maybe not, but the pancreas comes from a young donor. So you also have that to deal with.
Okay. So that is quite a shock.
It can't be like you can donate a liver, I think, at any age. But with the pancreas, it has to be a younger donor. So knowing that it has to be a younger donor, you also have everything at once. That family is not going to experience maybe wedding, maybe graduation, maybe driving. I mean, there is an age cutoff for pancreas. So pancreas is a very, when you make that choice, you have to be mentally prepared that most likely your donor will be younger.
And that's something maybe that if a parent or someone is listening, I mean, no one ever wants that to happen in their life. And I fully understand it. I don't. I have children. I don't want it. I would never want to see that happen to them. But I guess it is kind of smart maybe to think in the back of your mind, if you're listening to this and you have children, what would you do? Because basically, and I'll let you explain, you need to be brain dead basically, and that needs to go by two different doctors.
It's not like the movie. Yeah, it's not like the movies. They're treated with the best care possible. They don't want people in a hospital, and I know firsthand, they do not want someone to be a donor. They don't. They want them to live. They're going to do, they take a Hippocratic oath. They're going to do everything they can to save that loved one. Absolutely. And they double and triple, and it's a long process. So on the family side, they're ready to say goodbye, but unable to donate, they keep going and testing and processing. And it is a little drawn out. And it's because they want to make 100% sure that they're no longer here. They're clinically brain dead. So people say, oh, well, a lot of people have a misconception. Well, if they pass away, they can be a donor. No, not always.
And in most situations, it is a brain death. They're clinically declared brain dead once by and this is important, an in-facility doctor. Now, they can't use because they're afraid, two doctors from the same hospital would agree. So what they have gone a step further, and they get a second opinion from an outside source, an outside physician, not one that's affiliated with where the patient is or the loved one is. So it's the people that make the choice for their family to donate. They're treated like they are royalty. In other words, they want that person to be 100% sure that their loved one is no longer here. Yeah, and actually, I was talking to Ashley a few episodes back, and she said, too, it's not even the same team. It's a completely different team that goes out and procures the organs and talks to the family. So all this happens it's not like the same doctor that's working on you also is thinking, well, we can donate this organ to such and such. They don't do that, like you said, as you see in the movies. It's a complete different team that will,
Yes, it's nothing like that. I think that the heroes start with A, the family, 100%, B, the person that passed, and C, the education that's involved. They're all heroes. They're all a big part of why you're alive, why I'm alive. Well, all of us that receive transplants, and once we receive them, we're grateful and we want to succeed. We don't want to stop succeeding. It gives us an opportunity to do things that we can never do before. Right. And we're not careless about it, I think.
And of course, I've talked about this, and even Ashley talked about this. There is and you even mentioned in the interview earlier, there is like a mental test they will give you before that you are awarded or even considered to receive an organ. They don't want to find some psychotic person that's going to go out and kill themselves, or somebody that's going to go out and use drugs that could possibly, overdose. They're looking for, people that are wanting to live, needing to live, and are going to take care of the organ that you are receiving.
Yes. And I know for me, I don't smoke, I don't drink, I don't do bad habits. I value the organ. Not to say I might not have a sip of champagne or something at a wedding, but I know that organ needs to eat healthy. And, I don't want to be the one making the call and saying, I lost your loved one's organ. So in my case, the pancreas is so fragile that I have to, I want to watch my weight. But I had never had like certain foods. And after my transplant, I now can have those foods. I never knew what I was missing, actually. Which could be dangerous because I'm like, oh, this is what this is?
Yeah, this is good.
Okay. I'm like, I never knew because I couldn't eat them before. To me, when holidays came around like Halloween, I thought fruit was a normal thing. That was my trick or treat. Now I go, oh, it's Halloween. Maybe I'll try this Dove bar. And I don't like it anyways because I never grew up eating it. But, it's kind of funny. Like if I want to go get a latte, I can. Where before I'd go, do you have sugar free? And what's in the sugar free? And I don't have to worry about that searching for what I can eat. If I want to go eat something, I can eat it. I might not like it, but at least I can try it.
And I will admit I've had a few cheeseburgers in my day after receiving my heart transplant. Although and also, and I don't know if we should say this, but I mean, it's a true fact. The hospital that has given you the organ, I mean, they want to look the best they can. So the longer they keep us living and healthy, the better it looks on their record also. So just to put that out there, they like to keep us healthy too.
Yeah. And like you said, we still have constant visits, maybe more now, as far as going to the dermatologist, going to get your scans, your teeth fixed, your vision checked, they want us like as healthy as health can be.
Amen. Anything else that maybe you want to talk about or mention that I've missed here in the last few minutes?
Well, I think pancreas is different, and no two people, when you receive a pancreas or any organ, no two people are the same. So some people might say, oh, it was horrible. I always tell everyone with a pancreas, the first 2 years, you're like a toddler. You're learning the steps, what it takes to succeed. And you're going to have highs and you're going to have lows, like with any organ. But once you've reached certain milestones, it's like you can live your life like everyone else. And meaning you can get up, you can eat, you can do things like drive a car, something I could hardly do before, which now I love to drive. But there's a lot of things that change. The number one thing I could tell anyone that's going to receive a pancreas, don't go into it thinking that it's going to be a perfect world, because it takes time like anything else. You got to change your meds. You got to adjust your meds. You got to listen to what they say, even if it seems, because it gets better and better.
I remember too, when I first got my heart transplant and I was getting ready to leave the hospital, and Nurse Lisa is probably one of my favorite people in the whole wide world. I've been working with her for the last 21 years. She's still there at Tampa General. But I remember before I left the hospital, I go, oh my God, this is the meanest lady I've ever met, because she sat down and she told me this and this and this, and this is how important this is. And I mean, basically kind of like a scared straight thing, these pills, you must take them. And I'm walking out going, man, but now I love her to death, and she is one of my favorite people in the world. And I even told her, I said, man, when you first gave me that speech, I was scared to death of you. I said, man, this lady, she is like mean and she's crazy. And but I told her, I said, I love you and you are the greatest person ever. But man, like that first time I met you and you were explaining the medication, whoo, you scared the hell out of me.
Well, with my pancreas transplant, they never told me what the life expectancy was. Now, on a pancreas, we actually have what's called a life expectancy of the organ. And it's called a half-life, is normally between 7 to 10 years. And why they say that is because most people get it and go hog wild. Okay. But I'm 15 years, and here in Florida, they've never heard of that. They're like in shock. Wow. But I think if you appreciate what you're told and you listen to, I call them nurse hatchets. They're really not. They're really there to really enforce, hey, you got to take your meds. You got to follow the rules and the protocols. If you could, how hard is it to wake up and take a couple pills? It's 5 minutes at the most?
Yeah.
Of your life to live your whole life. And it may not be for everyone. Some people just aren't cut out for it.
Well, one thing you said in the beginning too, and I hear it every time I interview someone with a transplant. No two transplant patients ever work out the same. So there is no normal. Everybody has a different experience. Everybody's body makeup is different. Everybody's, organ they receive has a different makeup. So there's never two transplants that will ever go exactly the same.
No, like I always laugh because I'm a female. My donor was a male. So I tease all the time. I said, I'm both. Like, what? I received a male's pancreas, but I'm a girl. So that makes me a tomboy automatically.
Well, I supposedly got a female kidney, so I better be careful myself.
So it doesn't matter. There's no bracket that says you can't donate. But I will say the pancreas, there's a lot of complex issues that arise. But people who are in and out of the hospital, and think about this, BJ, a diabetic is the number one problem in the United States. I mean, we have heart problems, what comes with the disease, heart, blindness, kidney failure. A pancreas could cut down on medical expenses. It could save taxpayers money. There's so many reasons to donate nowadays, not only there's a million points of view, but people that have no option and they maybe have pancreatitis every week and they're diabetic and getting a new one, they're no longer living in these hospitals. Like I spent every Christmas with the same nurses and doctors, every Easter, every Halloween. I mean, constantly. I knew the whole staff, their family, their grandkids. Now I couldn't even tell you a nurse's name in a hospital.
Amen.
So I think it is a personal choice. It's a personal decision. Of course, we know all religions support it because you're no longer with us when you're donating. And even those who don't believe in the afterlife or, say they're atheist, they're already gone. So no religion really pertains to the donation either because you're no longer living when you're donating. When you're doing a non-living donor. When you're doing a living donor, that's much different. But for a pancreas, there can only be, and I just heard this is changing, a non-living donor. But I have heard now that they're starting with, and I don't know if it's in the U.S., but they are starting with living donors, multiple living donors being able to donate islet cells. But I believe it's in the experimental stage, and I don't know if it's even been done yet.
I'd like to say thank you, Paige, for sharing your story this week. It is much appreciated. Hey, we want you to go wherever you subscribe to your favorite podcast. Make sure you give us that 5-star review and subscribe. Also, share this with any of your friends that you believe may be interested in organ transplantation or someone you just know that needs to listen. And if you'd like to get a hold of us, you can do so with the email bjodom55@gmail.com or go to our Facebook page. It's Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant Podcast. Until next time, this is BJ Odom asking you to enjoy the gift of life.